A drunk tourist, fireworks in hand, approached the royal guard, thinking his money gave him the right to mock him. He lit the fuse right at the guard's feet. But what happened next stunned everyone. An unexpected lesson that no one saw coming. What happened next changed everything. Let's start from the beginning. But before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. We share the untold stories, secrets, and traditions of the British Guards every day. And trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. The evening in London was foggy, but to Bob, the drunk tourist, everything around him was a blur. His feet were unsteady, swaying between the cobblestones like a rag doll on strings, as the whiskey in his veins made every step feel like a new adventure. His laughter echoed in the night, hollow and without cause, as he staggered aimlessly toward Buckingham Palace. The city around him, rich in tradition and history, seemed to fade into the background as he and his equally wasted friends created a scene that was more fitting for a pub brawl than a royal landmark. Then, like a beacon of his misdirected genius, he spotted him. The Royal Guard. Standing perfectly still, Edward looked every bit the statue he was supposed to be, with his stiff red uniform and towering bearskin hat. Bob, with a grin spreading across his face, staggered over to the guard, his words slurring as he pointed directly at him. "Hey, you! You must be so bored standing there, huh? Come on, let's have a drink," Bob bellowed, his voice cutting through the quiet evening like a chainsaw. His friends laughed, egging him on, completely oblivious to the tension bubbling beneath the surface. Edward didn't flinch. Not a twitch, not a single shift in his posture. Bob didn't notice, of course. He couldn't. His brain was too busy focusing on the fireworks he was now pulling from his backpack. "What do you think, huh? Want to join the fun?" Bob smirked, waving the box of fireworks in Edward's face like it was a brand new toy. "Seriously? You're really going to do this?" But of course, Bob wasn't concerned with decorum or respect. He was a tourist, and tourists, in his mind, could do whatever they wanted. The fact that Edward was a living symbol of British history didn't matter. Bob was paying for the show, so why shouldn't he get to make his own rules? With a reckless, drunken grin, Bob took one of the fireworks and crouched down to light the fuse. "You'll never be as fun as me," he muttered, clearly convinced that his actions were brilliant, not idiotic. And there he was, this proud tourist, standing inches away from the living statue, about to ruin everything with his utter lack of respect. Can you believe this guy? Honestly, who thinks this is okay? Edward remained stoic, his expression as unwavering as ever. Bob, however, wasn't even aware that he was crossing the line. He was too busy thinking he was the star of the show. It was the perfect setup for a disaster, and disaster was exactly what was coming. The tourists, however, weren't done. No, of course not. One of Bob's friends, an equally obnoxious character with a sense of "let's do more" that clearly had no limits, stepped up. "Let me show you a hack to make him blink," he yelled, grinning like he'd just discovered the secret to world peace. Without missing a beat, he pulled out a selfie stick, because why wouldn't you think that annoying a royal guard with a selfie stick is a good idea? And started running toward Edward, aiming the stick right at the poor soldier. "Come on, we need a perfect shot with this guy," someone else shouted, raising their phone higher as if it was the crown jewels. So, what does Bob do? Well, obviously, he doubles down. "Let's make this a real show," he muttered, as if setting a firework off near a royal soldier wasn't enough. Bob staggered forward, holding a firework, as though this was some brilliant idea that had never been thought of before. He lit the fuse, grinning like an idiot. "You'll regret not partying with me, pal," he slurred, still convinced this was the peak of entertainment. Can you believe this guy? Seriously, who thinks this is okay? Who thinks it's all right to mess with a symbol of national pride like this? We all know the Royal Guard is not some party prop for drunk tourists, but these guys? Apparently, they didn't get the memo. As Bob stumbled back, clearly unaware of the absurdity of the situation, the firework fizzed to life. Sparks flew, and tourists screamed, scrambling to get out of the way. For a moment, the confusion spread, with people dodging the rogue explosion like it was some kind of accident at a fireworks factory. The firework shot into the air and, surprise, it got lost in the thick fog, exploding with a loud, colorful burst above. Now this is where it gets even more absurd. The crowd, many of them filming the chaos, cheered. They honestly thought it was part of the show, like some accidental masterpiece. "Best show ever," one tourist shouted, clapping. And Edward, the stoic guard? Not a muscle moved. His eyes never wavered. The epitome of dignity in the face of absolute ridiculousness. Seriously, what was going on in these people's heads? As the firework continued to light up the sky, a sudden shift in the atmosphere occurred. Edward, still standing motionless, made the slightest turn. A quick glance, just enough to signal to the horse beside him. The horse, responding to its training and perhaps to Edward's subtle gesture, moved forward and knocked Bob straight into the bushes. The crowd gasped, some recording with their phones, others laughing at the absurdity of it all. Bob, who had just attempted to ignite a firework in front of the Royal Guard, now found himself tangled in bushes, covered in sparks, and completely disoriented. "Well, that wasn't the plan," Bob shouted as he tried to get up, but he stumbled backward and tripped over a barrier, sending himself straight into another pile of shrubbery. The crowd erupted into laughter. Edward, with a slight adjustment to his hat, turned back to face the crowd, his expression as unbothered as ever. No one knew whether he had intended for the horse to do that or if it was a pure accident, but it certainly worked. Bob, meanwhile, was a mess. One of the tourists shouted, "Hey, what happened to the show?" And the others burst into giggles. Meanwhile, Bob, still confused, kept yelling, "I was just trying to have a little fun." By now, the local police arrived on the scene to handle the fallout of Bob's drunken antics. As they escorted him away, Bob, still mumbling about his rights and fun, was being filmed by the same tourists who had been laughing earlier. His face, now infamous, was being shared across social media platforms with hashtags like #EpicFail and #NotTheFunYouExpected. As Bob was being led away, a group of onlookers shook their heads. One American tourist who had been shouting loudly just moments earlier finally turned to the others. "Why is he not smiling? We're paying for this, after all." The police officer, now taking Bob away, smiled wryly. "This isn't Disneyland, mate." Edward, ever the professional, adjusted his hat and resumed his post without missing a beat. The tourists, now sobered by the events, slowly dispersed, some still laughing, some stunned by how things had turned out. As the night carried on, one thing was clear. Edward, despite the absurdity, remained the calm center of the storm, a figure of unshakable professionalism amidst the chaos. If you enjoyed this story, leave a like and let us know in the comments which guard tradition you'd like us to cover next. See you in the next video.